Hello, coin collectors, and welcome to DC Coin World International Coin Channel. And I just got a pile of George the Sixth farthings, and I'm just gonna go through them and um, talk about all the different years. And we have 1937 to 1952, and they're broken into two different groups. There's a 1937 to 1948 group, and then there's a 1949 to 1952 group. And the reason that they're broken into two different groups is because um, in 1948, India achieved independence, and so what happened was they actually had to change the coins. So let's take a look just from the start of this, and let's see if we can find out which ones are which and how to figure out which ones are which. So let's blow this up a little bit and get the light correct on here, and we'll see that we've got a portrait of George the Sixth here, and it says George the Sixth under his chin, DG, by the grace of God, Brit on, King of all Britons, Brittons, and the Rex is the king, FD, Defender of the Faith, in Ind Imp. The Ind Imp is what they needed to change, and that was because he was the Imperator or Emperor of India when this coin came out. So we know this coin came out in 1948 or before. George VI, of course, uh, became king in 1937 and first came out on coins in 1937. And so let's take a look at this. So we see that it has a smooth edge. It's a bronze coin. It weighs 2.83 grams. And we tip it over, we see that we have on the back what's called the Eurasian wren. And that's WREN. That's how you spell this bird's name. And this says 1937. So this is the first year that they came out. And if you look at it closely, if we tip it up, and let's see if we can get this a little tiny bit better and tip it up here, and we can, well, let's get it even better than that. There we go. If we tip it up here, we can see that it says 1937 at the top. We see this beaded outer rim. We see the wren, and it's just kind of this kind of cute little bird. It says farthing here, and then right here behind the wren, and some people have said this looks like something else, but it's not. Um, it is actually somebody's initials. And the engraver of this was Harold Wilson Parker. And so what we see here is kind of an HWP, but usually I can only see the WP part of it. Let's see if we can. So this is supposed to be an HWP, but I really only see the WP, and that's for Harold Wilson Parker, who was the engraver of this Eurasian wren. And if we go to the front, we see that there is a little bit of an initial right here also. Let me see if I can get you that one. These coins obviously are a little bit old, and they have been used, and they're that's an HP. And the HP here is for Thomas Humphrey Paget, of course, who did the portrait of King George VI, and this was the with the Ind Imp. So there's a 37. Let's see what else we got here. We have a 51. So we're just going to go through them in no particular order. In 1937, um, I should say that when they first came out with these, they made 8.1 million. In 1951, and this, I'm glad we kind of picked this one up because this is slightly different than the other one. Still says the same on the back. So it still says 1951, still says farthing, still is the same engravers here, Wilson Parker. But if we turn it over onto the front, we see that there's something quite different right over here. And this is how we can tell these coins. If you don't see the Ind Imp, you know this is 1949 or after, because India achieved its independence in 1948, and they took the Emperor of India off the British or United Kingdom coins in 1948. So this is a 51, and this is just a beautiful one. Now sometimes what will happen is you get these coins that are really shiny and really coppery. Chances are what's happened with those is they've been put in some kind of salt and vinegar solution. So I tried not to put any of those coins out today, uh, and we probably won't see many of those. Here's a 1950, so again, we know that it's going to have no end imp on it, and of course the Thomas Humphrey Paget. And I should say that these there are these dots going around the coin, and sometimes when you have a an error coin, some of these dots or some of these letters don't match up right, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but not very much because not a whole lot of error coins have been are collectible for this age. So again, so this is our detective work. We look here and we see the end imp. We know it's 48 or before. And there it is in 1941. Some of these, look at this. So we've got something on here. This is a W right there. So sometimes you see these coins. Sometimes people do this and just put them back in, and sometimes this was I got this in the United States. Sometimes the GIs would actually carve their little and keep these for like mementos. So sometimes the soldiers who were in Britain would take these home and kind of scratch them in. So sometimes you'll see a US N for US Navy, or sometimes you'll see some initials, or sometimes you'll see some other stuff on there. So that's a 41. And of course, that's often with the war coins. Here's a 44. And of course, this was at a time during the war where things were really, really, really kind of iffy. In 1944, they were still making these coins, but Britain and the United States and the world was just in turmoil. They made 25 million of these in 1944. If you get a good one, like a really an uncirculated one, it's probably worth $4 or $5. If you get one like this, it's probably worth 75 cents for the 44. And again, we know it's going to be end imp on here. Now, let's talk about what this coin was worth at the time that it was produced. And so with farthings, remember a farthing is worth a quarter of a penny or 1/4 of a penny. And so when we're talking about the value, so here's a British penny. This is a 62. Of course, it has Britannia on it with the lighthouse and the ocean and stuff. This coin here was there were four of these in this coin. This is of course the Queen Elizabeth. I just grabbed it. Um, there are Georges, the 6 pennies. Um, so four of these for one of these, which and there were 240 of these to a pound. So that means that there were 960 farthings to a pound. So 960 of these. Could it buy anything? It could buy very, very little. But during the war, and actually, if we're talking about 1937, remember that the world was in a big depression in 1937. So a farthing might be able to buy you enough food to survive one day, possibly. Maybe a little bit of bread or something else. And a few farthings, you could probably make a meal of it. Now we know this it's going to have end imp on it because it's a 45, and this, of course, the last year of what we call now World War II. What's this one? Is a 46. So this is a post-war. Now, when we talk about the depression, the world depression coming before World War II, so in 1937 the world was in a depression. We need to remember that it took Britain probably 8 or 10 years after World War II to get its economy back on track because of all the bombing and all the people that died and because of the destruction. So that in 1946, the United Kingdom was still a pretty poor country, and these farthings were still worth something. This is a 39. So in 1939, of course, that's when the United Kingdom entered World War II and began to be attacked by the Germans in 1939. So there's George VI here. A big year, end imp, of course, on it. This one, end imp, so we know it's before 48. And there's a 1940, the first full year of the war. The United States hadn't entered the war yet. The United States didn't enter World War II until 1941, and the Britons were kind of on their own. We were giving them some support from the United States, but they were fighting the battles on their own. This one, I like this one. Um, this one is somebody made and put it into a necklace. And we don't know what year it is, but we can figure out exactly what year it is. How do we do that? We flip it over and we see that it doesn't have an end imp on it. And so that means it must be after 1948. We know that George VI died in 1952, and so they didn't make any of the farthings with him on them after 1952. So this has to be a 1951. That's what our detective work will show us on this one. Is it a value? It's kind of fun because it I guess you could put it on your own necklace or bracelet, but it's just kind of fun to kind of figure out what year it was. Um, Here's a 43, same thing. And um, now, one of the things that we noticed was that because they took the end imp off of these, they changed the portrait just a little bit. And I don't know if you can see that, but this one actually um, has bigger lettering on it, so that if we put these together, it's you probably can't even see it. The lettering's actually a little bit bigger on this. That's how they used it to fill a coin, because they took these letters off, so they made all the other ones longer and bigger. There's a 43. How many more we got? We got a few more to go. There's a 47. And you see a lot of this kind of, sometimes it's a little greenish on here. Um, and it's just because the material, there's a bunch of the green. So when we're talking about a bronze coin, we know, of course, bronze coin has copper in it, and so the copper will green over time. There's another one, and there's our 38. So if you're collecting these and you want to get the most valuable ones, 1937 proof coins are probably some of the most valuable ones. 37 proofs, they only made 26,000 of them. They were $7 to $10. The other coins, there is a if you get some uncirculated coins from the late 30s and early 40s, those are often going to be worth $5 to $7 too, for the uncirculated versions. There's a 48. Let's just go through the rest of them. There's a 49. So by 1949, remember we had switched over, of course. So if we see the 49, we know it's not going to have an end imp on it. By 1949, in the post-war, they were making about 8 million of these a year. So this one here is probably worth 50 to 75 cents US, and $2 or $3 US uncirculated. This is a 51. This one here is a weird one. This is the one I asked some people for help with, and I think they thought I was messing with them. Somebody did something to this. I don't know whether they coated it in some other material or what, but it has like this silver or copper, cupro-nickel cover on it. Um, and so I'm not sure what it is, but I put it in a video, and people thought that I was messing with them. And maybe they know what it is, and they just didn't tell me, but I don't know why this coin is so silverish. And then, of course, this one here is the 42. What happened after these coins? Well, of course, when Queen Elizabeth became queen, they put her portrait on here. And, of course, this is the famous first portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, the Mary Gillick portrait. And, of course, they kept the same thing on the back. And this is 1953, so remember 1953, this is a special coin because it has the Brit Om on it. That's the only year Queen Elizabeth has the Brit Om, or Queen of all Britons, on it. After that, they took that off. So 1953 is a collectible Queen Elizabeth. What came before? Of course, George V. And of course, Brit Om Rex. And this one, we end imp. We know this is going to be earlier. And what year is it? 1926. And look at the back of this one. They didn't have the Wren on it. So it says Farthing, but of course it's Britannia ruling the waves again. And way down at the bottom, we see the 1926. All right, that's all we have today from DC Coinwell International Coin Channel. We'd love to have you subscribe to our channel and leave any comments you have in the comments section. Thank you for watching.